In NextJS, you can statically generate your pages using getStaticProps. Now, getStaticProps is a server-side feature or function. So, because it's a server-side function, you can get access to things like your database and your file system. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to fetch your data using a MySQL database. So the prerequisites for this, for you to follow along with this video, is that you already have access to a MySQL database, and you can log in with a test user and test. As long as you can, you know the username and password, and so you'll also have a host name, which would be, if it's local, is localhost. So as long as you got a database set up, and I'll be using PHP MyAdmin to get access to it. You can use any MySQL admin tools that you're familiar with. So I'm going to be using this block of SQL code to populate my database. I'm basically going to create a table called post, and then create a title and content, and it's going to be a VARCHAR. Then I'm just going to populate it with some insert commands to populate the data. And then I'm going to create a sort of a configuration in NextJS. You can store your environmental variables in a file called env.local. So in this file, you can store your details about your database or any other resources, and you can define your local host, and you can define database table and user and password. So we're gonna store our sort of connection configuration settings in the env.local file. Now this feature is ready out the box, so all you got to do is create that file and put this in there. So then I'm gonna install a component called serverless-mysql, which is what you use to connect with your MySQL database in NextJS applications. Then I'm going to create a connection configuration module or component so that you can reuse that particular connection details throughout your application. So this is just to we just connecting to a database and then defining a query handler. So then I'm going to create an endpoint that is going to generate a response from data from the MySQL database. Then I'm going to show you how to create a blog page and then render the posts using data from the MySQL database. So if you like these type of videos, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you, and enjoy the video. So let's get started. So as you can see, I've already created a starter application using npx create next app and called it my blog. You can call it anything you want. So from there, so we've got the standard setup for our next app there. Okay, so coming back to this, the database, MySQL database. So what I'm going to do is I've got a PHP MyAdmin open already, and I've got created a database called my blog here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just so I'm going to copy that block of code, the SQL code, into my database, and click on the go and click OK. Okay, that's done it. So in our post, we've got the data in there now. Okay, so we got the title and the content, and we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 posts in there. So we go back. Then the next we're gonna be creating a file called env.local. Now, and this is an environment variables. This is where you store your environment variables. So so anything to do with resources, details about resources that you want to connect in your application, that you store as variables in here. So in our case, we're going to store our local, well, the name of the database and the host name, the database name and username and password to log in. So we're going to put that into a file called env.local. Okay, now in Next.js, this feature comes out the box. So all it is so I'm going to just copy this and go to file new. I'm creating a file under the root of my application directory. So create new, and I'm going to call it .env.local. Okay, so inside it, I'm just gonna copy those details and then just do a save. Okay, so cover. Okay, so now we've got the environment variables. Now we're gonna install the serverless component. So you can do a search in serverless-mysql under npm site. So basically what it is it's a component that allows you to connect to a MySQL database. So the way to use this function is, you have this block of code as a sort of a helper for connecting to your database. So in the first part, we're creating an object, a MySQL object from the component, and we're feeding in environment variables. So as you can see, process.env endpoint database. So it's you're initiating the connection with these configurations from the environment variables. Okay, so once you created a MySQL object, then you can use it in a sort of query handler as they've done here. So it'll be in a sync wait function, and so as you can see, we're saying our results equals wait on MySQL query. So it's gonna make a connection with the MySQL, and it's gonna query, and this will be the query string. So and then after that, we're gonna end the connection and return the results. Now in this example, they've used a Lambda way of doing things. So we're going to do it in a more modular way. We do it in React and Next.js. So basically, this sort of we're going to do similar code to this. Not going to be that much difference, but this is how it's going to work. So if we go back, okay. So we're going to go terminal, new terminal, and we're going to do npm install serverless-mysql. Press enter, and I should install it. Okay, that's done. So now we're gonna set up the DB connection. For that, first we're gonna create a folder called lib, and we're gonna have our DB connection in there. So lib, and then under lib, I'm gonna create a new file called db.js. Okay, so we're gonna have our database connection here. First, we're going to import MySQL from serverless-mysql. Then we're going to export a DB object initialized from MySQL. So it's going to be, so we're going to call the MySQL component, and we're going to feed it a config object, which is going to be basically we're going to use the environment variables to initialize it with we're using the process.env, so it will get the env variables from our env.local. So we're using those variables here. As you can see, MySQL host and database name and username, and as you can see here in the env. So we'll be using these configurations. So then we need to so we're going to have another function, which is going to be an async function, and this is going to be sort of a query helper function. And this function is going to be called with a query string and an optional values. Now it's going to, inside it, it's going to have a block of code. It's going to be a try and catch block of code, and we're going to call the DB object and call the query method with the query string and values, and we're going to put it into results, and then we're going to end the DB connection and return the results. And in the catch, we're going to have a output any error message. So we're going to import this helper into our application, and then we're going to use it like this. So it's just going to be, and this is going to be like the query string, so it's going to look like this. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to create an endpoint, okay, under the API, and it's going to query the database and return a JSON object for the API endpoint. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it post.js. Okay, for the post endpoint script, we're going to first import SQL query from our DB helper. Remember, we put the DB helper outside of pages because we put shared code outside of the pages and directory in general. Then we're going to have a handler for this endpoint, and it's going to basically be an async call, and it's going to have two parameters. The first one I put as the underscore because it's usually the request and response, so we're just going to use the respond object. Okay, and in the main code we're going to have a try and catch block of code, and in the try we're going to call the SQL query, and we're going to put the return object in results, and it's going to have a parameter which is going to be the query string. So the query string is going to be basically, it's just going to be select all from post and order by title, and then we're going to return the results as a JSON object, and in the catch we're going to just output any errors. So if I go to the terminal and go to new terminal, and we just do an npm run dev, and then we should be able to open up our browser in localhost 3000. So as you see, the application is running. This is the index page. So we go to the API, and we go to posts. Okay, so we got the response as a JSON object, so that's working. Okay, now that we've got our endpoint working, it reads from a database and it outputs a JSON object. So now we need to use this endpoint to render some posts in a page. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create a page under pages, and I'm going to call it blog.js. And here I'm going to have two functions. Okay, and the first function is the page function, so it's going to be it's going to be an export default, and I'm going to call it blog, and it's going to have an argument props. Okay, and then I'm going to get the data props, and I'm going to render it in the return. So it's the JSX part here. Okay, so in the second function is the getStaticProps. getStaticProps is a server-side function, and you use this function to generate static pages. So just by including this getStaticProps, it will flag this page as statically generated. So in the getStaticProps function, first we're gonna do a fetch, synchronous fetch, and we're gonna fetch the endpoint. So as you recall, we endpoint was localhost port 3000 API/post. So we're using that address there, and then when we get the response, we're gonna put that into post as a JSON object, and then we're just gonna return it, and the return will be a props object, and inside there we're gonna have posts. Now this will be fed into our blog page, so that's what the props is there. So this return goes into there. So to quickly demonstrate this, I'm going to do a constant, and I say post. We're going to destructure the props, and equals props, and then we're going to console log, and we're going to say post. If I save this, it's going to destructure the props and put it into post, and we're going to extract post, and then we're going to console log. So if I save that, and I go into the browser and go into our blog page, okay, so it's got the welcome message. Now if I go into the console, so it's getting the data as well, so that's good. Now that we've got our data into our page, we can loop through it now with a map command, and in the arrow function I'm going to return it with an empty div, and then within there I'm going to have a h2 for the title, and then I'm going to have a p element for the content, and then have a break and save it, and this should render it. Okay, so it's rendered. Just do a refresh. Okay, so it's doing as we intended. Okay, so that's how you get your data into your application using an endpoint and MySQL database. Now there is another way to get your data in directly using the query helper within the getStaticProps. So if I go back to the API and post, and I copy this block of code, and I can reuse it, but I need to change it a little bit. So if I comment this out and I paste it directly in, okay, now I'm going to so the return is going to be this return. So I'm just going to copy, just move it to there. So now it's doing the query, and it's going to return post. Now we need to get this results and change it into a JSON format. So what we need to do is we need to say constant, and we'll say post equals, and we're going to say JSON dot pass. Okay, and we need to stringify the results. So it's JSON dot stringify, and we need to say results. Now, and then we pass that into there, and this will go into our page. Now, if there's an error. We're going to remove this because we're not dealing with our response objects. So we can say, we'll just copy this block of code again, but we're just gonna say post is false. Okay, so it's gonna flag it as there's no post. So one more thing we need to do is, because we're using this query helper, we need to import that as well. So if I go back in to the post, API post, so we need to copy this import command so that we can use the helper in the blog. So if I put that at the top, and because we're one level up from API, so we don't need the // so that should be the correct path. Okay, so we'll save that. There you go. It's getting the same post. So I can just, so if I go back into the MySQL my admin, I can change something here, and let's just say I've add in some extra X's and X's, go, just to make sure that this is picking up the right one. So if I do a refresh, so it's picking up that as well. So that's how you that's another way to get your database data into your application. So you can actually do the SQL queries from here, from getStaticProps. And another thing we can do is we can put an error conditional rendering on error. So as you can see here, we're returning post as false there. So I can quickly come here and I'll say if not post, then just say something went wrong. Something wrong. So to test this out, I can just go into the env.local and just change the password or something, so it's not going to log in properly. So go back and I do a refresh. I think I need to do a build. Yeah, I need to do a build because it changed this env. So I do a build, control yes, run dev. Because I changed the environment local variable, I need to do a build. So if I do a refresh now, okay, so that's something else. Okay, so I forgot to put a return here. Return. And save. Put a space there. Save. Okay, so we do a refresh. Okay, something went wrong. So that's working. So that's another way to get your data into your next application. So hope you enjoyed this video, and please subscribe to my channel if you want more videos like this.